Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. All right, hit it up. There we go. Fascist point. Oh, we almost put the arm in an interesting way. Fascist Roman salute here. Fascist points with Sager and Emily. Gotta keep the arm down, right? You gotta keep the volume down, man. The volume what? This is what it's all about, Emily. All right, we can find, remember, all of our predecessors, they would speak loudly and formally to command attention. All right, I'm giving the critics enough there. What are we starting with? We have a huge breaking news here. Thousands more troops are headed to the Middle East. We added it in as of this morning. So we're going to do a little mini block here at the top just to update everybody on the situation with Iran. We're also going to talk about inflation. That is by far our biggest story. We have the IMF warning about rapid inflation spreading across the entire global economy. Gas prices at $4.11 a gallon here. Beef is going up. Fertilizer is drying up for farmers. Things are not looking good here in the United States of America. Emily, we're going to talk about polling, and the vice president at an event yesterday with TPUSA did not look good for him or for the administration. Basically a stadium that was like a quarter full. What would you say? I mean, look, may have been less than that. Bad luck. Yeah, it was bad luck and giving some pleas to younger conservatives not to flee the movement. We'll see how it works out. Europe, this is a fascinating story. So we covered the Pope Francis yesterday. It turns out now, yeah, it's a good, we'll pepper a little SAT verbiage in here. So we had the Pope Frank, which we thought it was over. Well, no, it's not over. So the Italian Prime Minister Meloni, she's defending the Pope, and now Trump is trashing her. And then the Italian Prime Minister is now suspending a defense agreement with Israel. So really fascinating in terms of how this war just continues to rewrite geopolitics. Shail Ben Ephraim is going to join us. He is a geopolitical analyst. He's an Israeli. He's going to join us to talk about this Lebanese-Israeli meeting that happened here in Washington yesterday. I believe it was the highest level talk since the 1980s. So interesting, but of course, Israel wants to keep bombing Lebanon, violating the ceasefire that originally was agreed upon by the United States. So I'm interested to hear what he says. And he had a very fascinating breakdown and kind of interest in the domestic politics of Israel, which I didn't fully know. And then finally we are going to talk about these scientists. And there is now a 10th missing scientist who is linked to all of these missing scientists. We're going to be joined by Lauren Conlon of Pop Crime TV. I saw a segment that she did, Emily. Phenomenal job. She's one of those true crime people, and she really delves into the details. So it's much better than hearing from an idiot like me. And then, of course, everybody's favorite Professor Robert Papp, the escalation trap, will be joining us at 10 a.m. to break down not only these latest troops into the region, but also the bigger picture, whether we're in a real ceasefire or not. We're always interested to hear what he has to say. Before we get to that, thank you to everybody subscribing to the show, breakingpoints.com. We are doing the AMA today. We went a little late yesterday, so we weren't able to do it. And then, of course, if you're listening to this on a podcast, please share an episode with a friend. And on YouTube, go ahead and hit subscribe to our channel. 2.02 just doesn't do it for me. What's your number? Oh, you want, yeah, well, but it needs to be clean. What's your number? 50 million. 50 million. Oh my God, that's why we're here. That's like Mr. Beast nonsense. Let's be honest. We've got to set reasonable goals. Crystal's at 2.5. Miss Beast type. Crystal's 2.5. I'm 2.22. We could stop right there. 222. Like nice and clean. I like 2.0 comma, but then it immediately went up to 2.01 thanks to you. I think you're the person who gave you and Ryan were begging, and I was like, no, you've got to stop. We have to stop at 2. All right, let's go ahead and hit it. Let's get to the mini block. So turning now to this ground troop news, going to put this up here on the screen. Washington Post Stan Lamothe reporting U.S. sends thousands more troops to the Middle East as Trump seeks to squeeze Iran. The deployment includes sailors and Marines due to arrive as the administration attempts to enforce a maritime blockade against the regime in Tehran. The Pentagon is sending some 6,000 troops aboard the aircraft carrier USS George H.W. Bush, with several warships escorting it. About 4,200 others with the Boxer amphibious group and its embarked Marine Corps Task Force, the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, are also expected to arrive near the end of this month. So this infusion of firepower appears likely to coalesce with warships already in the Middle East as a ceasefire is set to expire. The troops will then join the estimated 50,000 personnel the Pentagon has said are involved in operations against Iran. So, Emily, I mean something Crystal and I always point out, these ceasefires, there's talks, there's reports, there's all this, but you've got to follow the troops. You don't send 2 or 3 aircraft carriers to the Middle East, sail them around the Horn of Africa, all to come there with tens of thousands of troops who are on their way, and the 82nd Airborne is already there, and you've got these Marine Expeditionary Forces coming from Asia, not to use them. At least so far in the Trump administration, every time there were thousands of troops in the Caribbean, all that talk about Maduro, at the end of the day, what did we do? We went and kidnapped him. So here with Iran, it's very unlikely usually to have all these forces and not use them. You could say it is a deterrent effect, and it certainly has been in U.S. history, but with this president, when the troops are there, he tends to use them. That's just my general analysis. I'm curious for your view. Well, it's interesting you say that, because actually just within the last 20 minutes or so, the Associated Press is out with a report. I'm reading from it now. Yeah, so they're saying too, please, while she's talking. Yeah, we can pop that up on the screen. So they're saying that in principle there's an agreement on the table. And this is what is interesting about your point, that you're following the troops and not necessarily just the deals. Because Trump said on the Maria Bartiromo show this morning, it's going to be a big couple of days in the Iran ceasefire negotiations. Pay attention to the next 2 days. So is this what he was signaling, this in principle agreement? Yeah, watch the next couple of days, and how significant actually is that? Let's break it down. This is an AP headline. It comes from Cairo, so always take a look at the dateline. It says mediators moved closer Wednesday to extending the ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran and restarting negotiations to salvage the fragile truce before it expires. A senior Iranian military official threatened to halt trade in the region if the U.S. does not lift its naval blockade. So that's all we've got. Note the dateline, it's from Cairo, and nobody else is running with this. Nobody else is running it. It's the Egyptians who are leaking it. That's fine, maybe it's true, but has Egypt really been the driving force here? So let's give a bigger picture to the audience. It's Egypt, Turkey, and Pakistan that are acting as these negotiators, the ones mediating between all sides. Egypt actually has pretty good relations and has been on the phone quite a bit with both the US and Iran. But even then, you've got a mediator saying there's an extension in principle. Maybe that's true. However, even if it is true, an extension of a ceasefire is not an end to hostilities. And we have all of these bigger picture dynamics. Again, with Venezuela, we saw on and off until assets could move into the region. With Gaza as well, by the way. Yeah, go into it. Well, I was going to say, how many times did we hear in principle? Maybe not that exact phrase, but over and over again Trump was saying something similar to what he's doing now, stretched out over months, that we have a deal, we have an agreement, or we're very close to ending the war. So it's part of what he sees as negotiation, putting things out in public and hoping that it sticks with the American people, and then hoping it moves the deal in one direction or another. Everybody, let's remember from that New York Times story, is that Trump had decided to attack Iran long before all of those negotiations had even happened. Back in early February, he had basically already made that decision, so all of those Jared Kushner talks, it's all kayfabe. It's a great point. Something tells me this time he actually does want a deal because he's panicking a bit over oil prices and the economy, but you never really know. He seemed like he wanted a deal back then too. And you've got all these tens of thousands of troops there, so you have to think on a long enough timeline, with Israel, with Trump, with the unpredictability and the lack of real good faith in these negotiations. And remember what I flagged yesterday, the technical experts. I spoke with a few people, and there were basically no real technical experts in the room in Islamabad. There was the vice president, there was a defense attaché, but that's not enough. You need serious civilian and military nuclear scientists, the same type of people who worked through the JCPOA. On the Iranian side, remember this as well, they're terrified. They can't even make a deal quickly because everything has to go back through layers of approval just to reach the supreme leader. It likely takes days just to communicate securely. They operate cautiously because they don't want leadership exposed or targeted. And then on the US side, at a minimum, we know JD had to call Trump multiple times in the middle of negotiations, which means he had no real authority to finalize anything. So when you put all that together, the machinery of this process just doesn't move in a couple of weeks, maybe not even in 3. At best, what you get is some broad statement like a memorandum of understanding with all the real details still unresolved. And what happens every time is that Israel steps in and starts drawing new red lines, claiming violations, shifting the terms, lobbying Trump, and suddenly things unravel, and we're back to escalation. All of this is a clear example of how not to conduct negotiations. And also, let's flag this again for everyone. Iran's top military command said it will disrupt trade flow in the Gulf of Oman, and the Red Sea if U.S. naval actions targeting Iranian shipping continue. They've said any such move would be viewed as a breach of the ceasefire. So there you go. As for Iranian naval assets, particularly the smaller ones used to potentially block the strait, at least according to CENTCOM, they've turned around. Now, whether that's true is unclear. There's a lot of conflicting information, but let's assume it is true. In that case, what it means is Iran faces a halt to oil production within weeks if the blockade holds. They only have about 2 weeks of storage capacity before they'd be forced to scale down refineries, which would be devastating to their economy. So that creates a ticking clock where they either find a solution or face severe economic consequences. And we know historically if they face that kind of pressure, they respond by trying to impose similar pressure elsewhere, particularly targeting Saudi Arabia by threatening shipping routes through the Bab el-Mandeb via allied groups. That's why, as we mentioned, a U.S. carrier had to avoid the Red Sea and instead travel all the way around Africa, which adds massive cost and delays arrival by weeks. So there's a lot of risk building here. The last thing I'll say is that unless there are major and surprising concessions from Iran, and quickly, we're not actually near an off-ramp. That's just not where things stand. It feels more like an attempt to project a desired outcome into reality. It's kayfabe, as you put it. That seems to be the strategy, trying to will a deal into existence. It reminds me of the idea of a reality distortion field, something people often talked about with Steve Jobs. That works when you're selling a product, shaping perception around design or innovation. But this isn't that. This is geopolitics, and trying to force reality here comes with real consequences, especially when prior decisions have already carried serious costs. So that's the mini update at the top. Anything else you want to add? To be fair, he hasn't really been publicly humbled, which would be difficult. Maybe not publicly, but behind the scenes I think there's definitely pressure. Agreed. If you liked that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps the show reach more people. And if you want the full show ad-free and delivered every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com. That's right, get the full show and support independent media at breakingpoints.com.